guest tonight, and we'll be live in just a couple of minutes. We're just going to be chatting here. Go ahead, Tim. You can ask your question.
Yes, you mentioned half sorting, so you're familiar with historic European martial arts, or
Yes, I am. I would not say that I am proficient in half sorting, but you can see behind me, or you can't see behind me yet, but when the video comes on, you'll see behind me a mostly authentic Viking round shield that I made, and my journey into working with unarmed and armed combat and martial arts in the broadest sense of the term led me to some of the fecht books and the Viking style martial arts, and I've trained with Roland Warzeka. I haven't done sword and buckler, but I've done some things. I would not. Right. I consider myself an enthusiast.
All right.
But certainly not an expert.
I am a fight snob, and I study that too. So. That's awesome.
Yeah, so you might be wondering, I mentioned to you who my sort of regulars are, and I didn't mention Tim among my regulars. Tim simply comes on whenever there's a promise of a deep discussion of violence, and violence is among his favorite hobbies, and so that's why Tim is with us tonight.
Excellent. I approve.
You're not wrong.
Hey, Patrick. Hey, Joffrey. Hello, Kai. Good to see you, my friend. Everybody popping in the chat already. It's going to be a fun conversation. Hello, hello. Jerry. Robert, you had a good day?
It was a busy day.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Things have been very busy lately. Yes, thanks for joining us all. Got a couple minutes here, just shooting the breeze. So you said 36 or 37 Kickstarters?
Something like that. I'm going to wind up being like one of the most prolific people that you've never heard of, because most of my work, I'm the only third-party publisher licensed to make things for Steve Jackson Games at this time.
Oh, wow.
Certainly in the fantasy space. So I've been doing, I have got like 17 publications for the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game powered by GURPS, and another 15 or 16 more for the fantasy trip.
Wow.
And so I was the first that they took the risk. So I might be the only current. The Amarillo Design Bureau has a license for their Star Trek stuff, but I think there's some weirdness to it. I have some of their stuff. I like what they're doing. I don't know a ton about it. But I'm the only person. Excuse me. I'm the only person who's been making new stuff independently. And excuse me.
Take your time. Robert has that effect on people.
Yeah, Anyway, so and I recently got permission. Well, actually, that's not true. 2 years ago, they gave me permission, but we finally signed the contract to do a powered by GURPS standalone role-playing game, like the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game, but kind of inspired by XCOM and the more militant parts of Stargate SG-1, and a little bit of inspiration taken from Scalzi's Old Man's War, which was...
Yeah, you know what's so funny about that? So I haven't heard that name brought up ever on here. So John Scalzi, actually I went to high school with that guy.
Fun.
Yeah, Webb Schools of California, and he was a very eclectic dude back then. He was a senior when I was a freshman. So I went to high school. I knew who he was. And yeah, his work is pretty cool. Old Man's War is a fun book.
It is, and I really liked the the universes of Dane, and because he's Scalzi, he subverts it later. Spoilers, but it's a great book, and one of the things that it touches on some things that I wanted to cover. But I ran a campaign in it, but one of the things that's cool about GURPS is it does firearms better than almost any other system, and that was kind of how I got my start. That's the ballistic and gaming ballistic. So I really wanted to bring that up, and they let me. They're going to let me. So that's going to be the project that I do at the end of the year. But between now and then, there's a lot more that I have between now and then. So anyway,
doing firearms is good because sometimes you want to shoot them in the face, and nothing satisfies more than that.
Sometimes you got to shoot them in the face. So.
Yeah, I've got a funny. I've got a funny John Scalzi story. I'll tell you when we go live on video in just a second. It just came to my mind. It was one of the few memories I have of him in high school, and it was pretty fun. I'm going to go ahead and kick off our intro, and as soon as the intro's over, we'll go live on video. Thanks everybody for joining us, and here is your introduction to Lore Masters Arcanum. That's the Sentinel from Hob. Custom artwork here for Blue Box. Everybody knows what that guy is. The custom cartographic stylings of Anna B. Meyer.
Enemy spotted.
We know him.
I have foreseen
And him.
doom.
Overgord and Iuzian Zombie Goat there. That was with you, Tim.
The Bayou Tapestry going on?
There you go, the Bill the Master crowd. Yeah, that's right. You do know your old military weapons. And now you are heard and seen. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. The Blue Box here at Lore Masters Arcanum 118. And make sure everybody get the screens in the right spot here. We got a couple that are off. Mine's a little bit off. But all of you look great. Tim, let me move yours. Thanks for joining us, and tonight we are super excited to have a guest. For those of you that are wondering, yes, Vivi had some family things that she's dealing with this week. She'll be back next week. Just keep her in your thoughts, and she'll be back with us very soon. And tonight we are joined by Douglas H. Cole. Douglas is the author of Dungeon Grappling, along with a lot of other stuff. He has done, I didn't realize this until we were doing the pre-roll discussion, he has done 37 Kickstarters now, published all kinds of content, an expert in numerous things. And so we're going to be looking forward to talking about the subject of unarmed combat and grappling today. And then, of course, I'm joined as always with my amazing and lovely co-host, Robert. You know him as Phantom NJ. Rob, thanks for being with us tonight. I know you've had a busy week, and it's always appreciated. And then also tonight we are joined by our other special guest, the ever mysterious Tim. You're wondering why Tim is with us? Well, if we're talking about anything that has to do with violence, you know Tim is going to be right there in the front row. And so, Tim, good to have you with us tonight. Welcome all. And Douglas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I know it came together very quickly, but an evening talking about gaming is a good evening.
Absolutely. And thank you for helping us make it come together so quickly. So to Douglas' credit, I didn't even know his name or have his information until last night after Josh ran the one shot, and it was Alexander. Alexander, you're now 2 for 2. Alexander introduced me to Richard Baker. And I had mentioned to him we had a grappling show tonight, and he said, I know who you might want to talk to. So Douglas, again, thank you so much for joining us so quickly. And it's going to be fun. So I'll pull up your book here in a moment. But let's start off with maybe just a bit about gaming and how you got into the gaming community, D&D, what systems you've played, and how you got started.
Sure. Briefly, I first got into gaming in about 1981 when my friend started me off on Advanced Dungeons and Dragons because, of course, he would never have started with the basic. So he had he was the first one with the IBM PC, and he had all the cool stuff. And
Sure.
He was the only one who could afford the computer that we could play Wizardry on, right? We go over his house and
Wizardry.
yeah, right. So
Yes.
So I started in there, and then I fell into a group of your typical artsy and outcast guys. I was never quite I was a varsity diver, and I was the jock of the group, and that is saying something, right? When I'm the jock of the group, although my friend Adam would dispute that because he was a very excellent volleyball player. Anyway, point is I got into we played System of the Week type stuff. Played a great Champions, a Robot Warriors campaign. Did a bunch of other stuff. But in 1989, my friend Mark introduced me to GURPS 3rd Edition Revised. And I don't know if we ever started a campaign, but I started looking at the system and I really liked it. And then when I went to college in Texas, I started getting more into it and playing more. And I've been kind of a fan of the system since 1989. And somewhere in graduate school, I started participating in Usenet, some of the Usenet discussions back when that was coming up. And I became a little bit better known to the Steve Jackson Games community. And eventually I did a little playtesting, and then I was lead playtesting, and then I wrote a little bit. And my very first book-length publication was GURPS Martial Arts Technical Grappling.
Ah, okay.
So that was in I think I finished the book in 2012, but they did the Ogre Kickstarter, which almost wiped them off the face of the planet from a business process perspective. It did so well, and no one knew that you don't overcommit stretch goals at that point, right? So it was like, oh, we need to do more, and it just got. I mean, the box has its own gravity well. It's so huge and so packed with stuff. But anyway, so I've done, but then somewhere in there I got into. I'd written some articles. I was blogging. I started a blog, Gaming Ballistic blog, in 2012, and at some point I decided that I should maybe try and do this as a paid hobby. And 5th edition had come out, and there were some things that I'm like, well, I just feel like if you have something that's as big as the shield behind me, maybe it ought to be worth more than +2 to armor class. But I've never fought with a shield, so maybe it's just something you get around, right? And so there were a bunch of things, and that's kind of where I started into my practical experience with European martial arts with the Viking sword and shield stuff. But I had done some Korean martial arts and blah blah blah. So it's kind of your eclectic stuff. I've done some Pathfinder, I've done some old school D&D, I've done some 5e, and I published what can only be described as a fantasy heartbreaker, out of which I pulled what eventually became Dungeon Grappling. That's my Dragon Heresy thing. Very, very, very. I have 1,000 of these in a warehouse in Tennessee, if anyone's interested. But
that's right around the corner from us here.
I fell for the Studio 2 was my distributor for this, and I fell for the marginal cost fallacy because I was young and naive, and I said, well, if 1,000 books, the minimum order quantity is however many dollars per book, I better order 1,500, because then my marginal cost is $6 a book, and surely I will be able to go through 1,500 books, because I was still high on the 1990s when a 10,000 print run for anything was here and gone.
Right.
But
So we're in Tennessee. I was driving through the state in mid-May.
Yeah.
One end to the other, so.
But anyway, so that's kind of my story. Is
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, no, I love that, Douglas, and it sounds to me from your, I don't know if you've seen this, but there is a gleam in Tim's eye that's typically reserved for his wife. When you start talking about like martial combat, European combat, like that, he is getting really, really enthused here. So we'll have to have you come back for broader combat discussions. We've had some of these more getting into the weaponry and the reality of what is possible in martial combat. But tonight, of course, the topic is without the weapons, by and large. Although weapons are part of the grappling, we'll discuss that also.
He had me at Fecht book.
Didn't even have to buy you dinner, Tim.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I've got Talhofer and Meyer, and I think Lichtenauer on my shelf over here.
Excellent.
Plus a couple others. So I don't need to invent this stuff. Some very smart, very experienced, very not dead people wrote it down for us.
Yes.
Well, they're dead now, but they obviously lived long enough.
They didn't
to write
get
their
killed
own
fighting.
Right. and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Fiore de Liberi. So.
Yes.
All right. So, enough of that.
Keen
All right.
Myers.
You are assuredly not remiss, and I told the propellers are spinning. Do you feel it, Rob?
Yep.
All right, so full disclosure, I mentioned this a little bit to Douglas beforehand. Why are we talking about grappling here on Blue Box? Actually, interestingly enough, it's a topic we've never delved into on our Lore Masters Arcanums. We've talked about so many other elements of combat, but never really the unarmed stuff. We've done some martial arts related things, but never specifically grappling. As everyone knows, we are on the cusp of the most ambitious and biggest campaign ever done here on Blue Box, Book 3 of Greyhawk Awakening, based in Dark Sun in the Flyness, in the Sea of Dust. That premiere episode is on Tuesday night at 5 o'clock. We'll talk about that more later. And it is going to feature, I am quite confident, more grappling than any game that I've played. And there are two primary reasons for this. One is character-driven. I've got a half giant who's a gladiator, 11 feet tall, 1,400 pounds, Tick, played by Rory. He's definitely going against his typecast after playing a gnome and a halfling. Now he's gone half giant. And Tick is going to want to put his hands on things. And then we have a Thrycreen, played by Demongund. And the Thrycreen, of course, 4 arms, excellent with grappling. It is part of their combat style. So one reason is the characters. The other reason I know I'm going to have a lot of grappling is the players. I just named 2 of my most technical, crunchy rules, like know it all, not in a bad way, but like know the rules really, really well. We'll study it in John and Rory. They're very detailed. So these guys are going to be pushing the limits of grappling, and I want the grappling to be done in a way that brings life to the game, makes the combat more interesting, more flavored and fun, has the right amount of crunch, but also keeps the pace of the game moving more quickly. So with that as the entrant into dungeon grappling, and I've got your book up on the stream now, talk to us about what inspired you to write this book, and then let's dive into some of the practical tips for it.
So thank you. The in a nutshell, having done grappling, and one of the interesting things is I was never a great grappler. I did martial arts. I did a Korean style that incorporated some grappling and a lot of throws and blah blah blah. But in not being a fantastic grappler, I'm not one of these people who will look, you just twitched your pinky and the kaiju goes flying and a 5-year-old can beat Brock Lesnar or whatever. But anyway, I was always a little frustrated that grappling, which is sort of the oldest stories on the planet, like Gilgamesh and Enkidu, started with these 2 getting to be good friends because they got into this like town-destroying grappling match over a girl. Because of course they got into a fight over a girl. That's like all the stories, right? But grappling is important, and differentiating between striking and grappling is a relatively recent thing. Right? If you read like Patrick O'Brien's boxing match in some of his early Aubrey Maturin series, they have a boxing match, and they're throwing each other into the posts and grabbing and pip, 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 pip. I mean, it's much closer to what we would consider mixed martial arts, because of course you grab the guy and you knee him in the face. The grabbing is important. And then when it looks like, like when I was originally writing technical grappling for GURPS, Sean Punch, the Dr. Crom, the line editor, said it's really funny that when what was the line? It was a great line. Like when big guy needs to distract dumb guard so smart guy can pick the lock, they send big guy over to start a fist fight rather than wrestle. Because as we all know, especially if you've been involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or any of the other things, grappling takes a while, or it can, unless you know. So it's not a biff done. It's you got to develop it. You can work it a little bit, and that is going to tie him up and you know put him in a headlock so that the guy can pick the lock. But in any case, I was always frustrated that grappling didn't happen more in games, mostly because the rules were bad. Because the assumption, and that's a pretty bold statement, and so
I don't think that. Yeah, it's really good. That's accurate.
You're correct.
Friendly audience there. But the thing was is that people were willing to abstract all of the works on striking combat into I roll 1d20 plus a bonus against a target number, roll damage. And we were all perfectly cool with that. That makes sense. But grappling is complicated. Well, no, not any more so than any of the really technical moves that you do in sword fighting. I mean, seriously, and angles and this and that. I mean, it's hard, right? I mean, expert strikers and expert martial artists in a weapon sense will tell you how complicated and finesse-filled and technical it is. But grappling, no, it's hard. And so I was like, no, I think that we can do better. And I was like, you know, if the rule that we all accept is roll a 1d20 plus a bonus against an armor class and then roll damage, well, why don't we do the exact same thing for grappling? Exact same sequence so you don't have to learn anything new, except the damage type, which is already present in most modern games, modern games, is control. And the more control, the more bad stuff happens to your opponents. And once you say, okay, well, I'm just doing a damage roll, you're kind of done, right? I mean, and then, you know, especially for a game like Pathfinder, anything from, I think, D&D 2nd edition onward has a stat block for every character and monster, right? So with Pathfinder, you can just say, oh, the more control you do relative to strength and size, right? And so it's self-scaling. It's the same sort of thing. The control. So what I usually recommend is roll your hit die as your damage type. So the brawny fighter types are doing more control points than the scrawny magic user types. And of course, martial artists, monks and stuff will add their martial arts bonus. So it naturally falls into place that the characters with more martial and who should be better at wrestling will be better at wrestling, and the characters that aren't. And then you scale it to strength, and strength is really important when you're wrestling. So once you start down that path, pretty soon you're like, oh, well, I have this currency of effect that I can do. How are you guys with language on this show?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so
I
I
speak
mean, once you
English.
have this reserve of, I'll just be. Once you have this reserve of currency that you can do cool stuff with, it starts to be like, oh, this is interesting. So one of the things that we do a lot in the Viking style thing is we do a lot of shield forward. Let's call it shield fencing. So we use the shield not just to defend, but we're prying open the opponent's defense using the shield. And pretty soon you can say, well, if control is just manipulating angles and lines and allowing yourself to do things while preventing your opponent from doing things, why can't I grapple with a shield? Why can't I do a sword bind, right? Why can't I use a weapon to transition into a throw? And if the currency of all that is the same, effectively grappling hit points of damage, and you can spend them to do cool things, you're like, oh, I can do all these things. I can spend them, or I can get over, if I'm over strength over 2 or something like that, I can do cool stuff. And after that, it's really just a matter of winging it. I mean, yeah, I have some worked examples in the book because that's what you do in these books. But once you accept the premise that you have this sort of reserve of control that you're building up. Oh, and if you want to break a grapple, It's not just it doesn't have to be if then. You attack my grapple and you do damage against my grapple. And you can either choose to grapple me back, in which case you got these two people who are both locked in combat, which you see, or you're doing something cool to get out of the grapple, in which case my control total goes down.
Gotcha. No, I like that. So, and that was what I saw reading through your book, is particularly what I think of the different systems you address here. You know, PF1E definitely has the most detailed out, thorough grappling system as compared to, like, say, 5E or Sword and Sorcery. But your control points piece really layers nicely on top of it. So, as I mentioned before the stream, we want to get into the general stuff of grappling, things which can apply to any system, why this book is a great resource. If you look at the book, you'll see he references different styles, different gaming systems in here. So whether you're a 5e player or a Pathfinder player, or you're playing something, OSR style, he's got all of that in here. Also, you get bonus points. You mentioned the Gilgamesh story. We were showing that. You're actually referencing here also a quote from the Belgariad. Mandaralan actually became the name of my paladin that I've played through the years. Fortunately, very few people actually know who that is. To see that in here was kind of fun for me when I read it. This, like many other books, did not hold the test of time. When I tried to pick it up 10 years ago and reread it, it was not nearly as good as it was when I was 12.
There's a lot of that goes on.
Yeah.
Well, and then he kept piling on and making it worse.
Yeah, exactly.
But I digress.
Yeah. So let's pause for a moment. We had a couple questions in the chat, but let Rob and Tim jump in here. Guys, what kind of questions do you have? Let's start with you, Rob.
Well, I mean, it's funny. We were talking when we were talking the other week about psionics, and I had referenced the fact that it's like kind of the proverbial redheaded stepchild of D&D, or especially AD&D at the beginning. Grappling was the child that constantly was left at the store.
Right.
because I mean, it barely is mentioned in the first edition player's handbook. It's like 3 tables in the DM's guide, and I mean, it's like the bare minimum was put in. And it's funny because, like, 1984 came around, it was the Summer Olympics, and first real Summer Olympics I can remember, because 1980, nobody was watching we had boycotted Russia and all that, and so you had Greco-Roman wrestling and all this stuff, like, for the first time watching is like, and plus wrestling, just general WWF at the time, wrestling was huge, especially in our family. And so it's like the idea of having wrestling matches as part of these tournaments in the game was appealing. And I really could have used this book back then, because there was nothing. I mean, it was really, really sad how badly supported it was in first edition AD&D.
Absolutely. Tim?
Well, I like what I've heard so far. I'm going to buy the book tonight.
There you go.
That's all I got to say about that. It's because there was
My job here is done. Good night.
There was not a whole lot in the, they had several, I guess Unearthed Arcana had a couple optional rules. They're not really great. And I asked you earlier if you had played Aftermath, because they had the way they handled grappling and throws is better than D&D, but it's not perfect, whatever. But the more I've done, I've only done a little bit of jiu-jitsu and in other combatives when I was in the Army and in training and stuff. And if someone is super good at it, it is a big deal. Do you have something that kind of accounts for levels, or is it just does it coincide only with your experience level?
In terms of your grappling ability?
Yeah.
So it scales with your basic attack bonus in Pathfinder. So the better at fighting you are, and I'm sure that you could create some feats or special training that would double your basic attack bonus.
That's right.
Or whatever, right? So you could easily create some feats that would, be just broad brush better. Certainly you could have some sort of combat mastery that instead of, I can hit better, I can do more control points. One of the things that I did in my Dragon Heresy system for certain type of weapons is I increase the threshold. Instead of just having a critical hit on a 20, it might be 18, 19, or 20 or whatever. So you could do something where you were more likely to do double damage by increasing the critical threshold. So once you get into it, there's all kinds of vectors that you could take. You could even have like an escape artist feat,
Right.
where when you're trying to break somebody else's grapple, you did double damage or more damage, or you suffered fewer penalties or whatever.
So Douglas, would that be an okay place for us to start if we took, like I sent you that flow chart today. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it.
I did. That was a flow chart, all right.
Yeah. So it looks like it's intimidating when you look at it, but it's really just walking through the same exact rule sets that you're talking about. But when you visualize it, it's very interesting to see how it plays out. So the question came up, where's the store? So we posted links to the main website, gamingballistic.com. And also I posted a link to the actual shop. You can see there's a ton of material that Douglas has produced through the years. And you can get, this is actually the very first Kickstarter book that he did. Now 36 Kickstarters later, he's still churning out.
17 Kickstarters.
Oh, 17. 36 books, 17 Kickstarters.
It's still a bunch, but yeah.
But this was his first. So if you go in there, you can check that out. And tonight, we're going to give away a copy of that as well, and I will pay for it. So Blue Box will buy one on our dime and send it to one of you tonight as a winner. We'll do a giveaway toward the end. I love that piece of art that's on the screen now. That's from your book, your other one, the Fantastic Dungeon Grappling, and his head has been separated there.
So this one is
It went off the screen, but yes.
Okay, went off the screen. So that one's interesting. If you know the HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts Community at all, that piece of art was painted by Roland Warzeka of Dimicator, who is kind of a famous, infamous, depending on whether you like what he's saying or not. But I like him. He's a great technical fighter. But he's a sword and buckler guy, and he also does a lot with Viking sword and shield. But he's also a fantastic artist. And I approached him for
yeah, it was a great piece. I'll pull it up again later, but it was a great piece. And when I first saw it, I'm like, where's the grappling? And when you look, he's got his foot down on the guy's spear, so he's kind of held the spear down with his foot, and that's, as the guy leaned forward, that's what allowed the decapitation to occur. It's a very, very cool.
And I have done that. And
literally, wow. Do we need to report this?
You know, so either sword or shield. It was they stabbed, and I used my shield to deflect the spear tip to the ground, and then I stepped on it, and then struck with my sword. But that would be after an attack, you would grapple the spear with the shield, and then you would pass the control to your foot to leave your hands available, blah blah blah, right? So it falls out reasonably well, but still maintaining a level of abstraction so that you're not, keep track of everything.
And it's shown in historical manuals of doing things like that.
Right.
That's right. Okay. Well, awesome. Yeah, I love that artwork piece. So we're going to take a look at this. We'll walk through it together, and then we're going to jump back to your dungeon grappling book and look how we can layer that into the core system I'm using here. But reminder, if you're playing 5e, it's got the same rule adaptations for 5e in the same book. So it doesn't matter which system you're playing, you can buy this book and you can apply it immediately into your games. All right. So I'm going to switch screens here, and right now we're looking at the D20 PFSRD, open source system for Pathfinder, and you start with CMB and CMD. Now you deal with this in your book as well. You're using a very similar system. So if you're unfamiliar with the Pathfinder system, you have combat maneuvers, and combat maneuvers can be used for a variety of different things. Bull rushing, grappling is one of many types of combat maneuvers. In combat maneuvers in Pathfinder, you have a CMB, which is the combat maneuver bonus, and then you have the CMD, which is the combat maneuver defense. A combat maneuver bonus is very simple. It's just like an attack roll, except you add a size modifier, right? So your CMB is, as a character, it's whatever your base attack is. It is your strength modifier, and then it's your size modifier. For most characters, it's going to be 0, because most humanoid characters are 0. They're medium. If you've got a large, like my half giant, he's going to have a +1 size modifier to his roll. So that becomes your combat maneuver bonus. That is what you're going to add to your D20 roll when you attempt to grapple. That is a variable number. The combat maneuver defense is a relatively static number. Think of that like your armor class, but specific to these types of maneuvers. A CMD, or the armor class for combat maneuvers, is the 10 plus your base attack bonus, plus your strength. So that's where the level is factoring in, Tim. You're getting better at this as you level up. That's your base attack bonus going up. So it's your base attack bonus and 10 plus strength and dex, because the idea is when you're defending, it's both how strong you are and how nimble you are, able to break that hold, able to dodge, able, when somebody shoots the legs, can you get back quick enough? So the combat maneuver defense factors in everything that the combat maneuver bonus does, but it adds dexterity, which is not normally added. Now, there are certain Pathfinder feats, which you mention in your book, which can leverage dexterity. If you're a dex-based grappler, then you can take a feat, just like weapon finesse would be taken for a blade, to apply an attack bonus rather than strength. You can use dex. The same types of feats exist for PF 1E and 2E, I believe, for grappling purposes. And then, you add any special modifiers, feats, spells, other things like this. So that's the core of the Pathfinder system. So it takes into account your size, your dexterity, it takes into account your level as your and then any other modifiers and feats that you have. And when you attempt a combat maneuver, like let's say in this case, grappling, Tim decides he's going to grapple John. He's going to roll a d20. He's going to add that CMB bonus to it. And whatever my CMD is, it's like a difficulty check, a DC, that he's got to overcome. If he overcomes that DC, he has successfully grappled me. I'm going to pause there. Comments, questions? Did I explain anything incorrectly from anyone else's perspective here? Does that make sense? Chat, any questions on that? This is kind of it's the basic. It's kind of the first part of it. So then let's come back and let's look at what happens once you have been successful. So if you have successfully executed your combat maneuver and you have grappled, now both parties gain the grappled condition. So the attacker, Tim, in this case, he's in a grappled state, and I am in a grappled state because we are in some way connected. He's grabbed my arm, he's hooked my legs, whatever, so we're both grappled, but he is the attacker, the grappler, and I am the grapplee. And then that kicks off several things that you can do. Once you've grappled someone, you can move. You can try to move the target with you, so he could drag me if he has me grappled. You can damage, so you can attempt to strike while you're grappling. You can try to take it to the next level, which is a pin. So a grapple is one level of vulnerability. Pin, if I am able to execute a secondary combat maneuver against you, I can pin you, but I can't pin you until I have you grappled. Okay, and then, or I can even go all the way to tying you up. So if I have rope and I've grappled you, pinned you down, now I can try to tie you up. So these are all sequential combat maneuvers. This walks you through what happens if you are grappled, what happens if there are multiple creatures, so on and so forth. Then when you get to the second round, there's a whole set of additional actions which can be kicked off. So everyone, don't get scared. I'm going to show you a flow chart. When you look at it, you're going to freak out, but it's not that complicated. We'll walk through it just real quickly here as a baseline, and then we're going to come back to how Douglas would help us modify this and make it a better system. While I'm pulling this up...
Question, John?
Yes.
With regards to pin, pins in PF Pathfinder 1, does it necessarily need, does they actually have to be knocked down, or is it like
no,
just pinned?
Yeah, pinned. Yeah, pinned is a state, which could mean you could be pinned to the ground, you could be pinned to a wall, you could have your arms pinned to your side.
Yeah,
that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thank you for that, Rob. All right, so while I'm going to switch over and show this flowchart while I am, the question came up, what about using a small weapon in the grapple like a dagger? Okay, so this is a great sort of controversy point that I would like to discuss. Most systems, including Pathfinder, and including, I believe, your base system, Douglas, allow for one-handed weapons to be used in a grappling state. So this would be, I've grappled you, and they would allow, for example, for a longsword to be used as an attacking weapon in that grappled state. I argue that even if you could, it would not be very effective, because when you're wielding a weapon like that, you're not just swinging an arm. You're using your feet. You're using your waist. You've got a lot of power. It's kind of an odd angle. If I just assume I'm holding onto his hand, if that's the only grapple I've done is hold onto his hand, that I'm trying to do like the knife fight and beat it. That's hard to do. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, there is a whole genre of fighting. Ringen am Schwert means wrestling at the sword. You're wrong. You can definitely wrestle with a sword and do all sorts of things with it. When you say pin, it gives a high school wrestling type of idea, but that's not grappling.
Well, no, I'm talking about not even the pin state now, grappling. So I figured somebody would tell me I'm wrong. So let's talk about that for a second, and I'll zoom in on this flow chart because it looks really small there, and I'm sure everybody is freaking out. So if you've got that sword, I realize you can still do things with it, right? I can slide it up against you. But am I getting a full D8 plus strength? Is it a full attack with a longsword that should deal the same damage as it would if I were standing 3 feet away from you, hewing away at you? And maybe the answer is yes, Tim.
Yeah, if I have sword and shove it into your armpit, and you only get 6 to 8 inches of blade into your armpit, it's probably going to do 1d8.
Here's where you get back to what type of damage does the sword do?
Right.
Is it
Piercing or slashing?
Piercing or slashing, yeah.
It's both.
And remember, it's a little bit more abstractified in D&D because those hit points don't represent just ability to absorb damage.
Right.
So in at least in dungeon grappling, what you wind up doing is you can and it can be subject to discussion. Long weapons in close combat require skill to do, because if you're up in close and your sword is waving around not engaged, then it's out of play. If you do half swording and take your sword by 2 hands, or just grab by the blade, which is a lot less dangerous than you'd think, you can use it as a lever to do cool stuff. More abstractly, what dungeon grappling says is you've built up this reserve of control, and you can trade control for injury. So you can say, I'm going to spend a certain number of control points at 4 control spent for every 1d of damage or 1d6 or whatever. But you could say, hey, I'm going to spend control points to do injury. And you can use that either as a force multiplier and say, well, a badly used sword might be D4, you're
right.
Not using it right. But you could work your way up, or sort of figure out, based on your game and your table's tolerance for nuance, you could decide what you want to do. It would be reasonable to say that long weapons are more
unwieldy.
Unwieldy in close combat, but usually the way that you deal with that is, if you make a successful attack roll penalized for unwieldiness, you've done the shit that you need to do to apply whatever damage you're trying to apply. So you might say 1d6 thrust, 1d10 with a 2-handed swing, but it's -10 or -5 or something like that to try and get that 1d10, but it's only -3 or -6 or whatever to get the stab. And then you can add control points to say up to double the damage, right? Where you're pulling, so you're leveraging your thing.
Okay, so let's.
Yeah. So there are ways of doing that with some of these with some of the abstractions involved in both grappling and striking. If you try and break it down too far, then you start to get yourself into a little bit of you want to make sure that you're abstracting the striking and the grappling the same amount.
Right. Exactly. And one of the players that I mentioned earlier, the one who's playing the Thrycreen and is very crunchy, has just joined. And yes, you've missed some important things, John, but we're still getting into the meat of it. So let's take that. Let's put that to the side. So for the moment, we're going to agree that John was wrong, and that you can effectively use a longsword in a grappled state. But I'm still thinking there need to be some modifiers or common sense applied to it. Tim's example of, if I can stick 6 inches of the pointy end into your armpit, that's a lot of damage, even if I couldn't get my full power behind it. But I would argue in a grappling state, that would be a difficult thing to do. And I think that's really what you're getting to with control points. So let's come back to the core Pathfinder system, and then we're going to figure out how to layer control points into it. So
it's a lot easier to stab him in the armpit grappling than it is not grappling.
That's true. That is true. I will give you that. Okay. All right. So let's walk through quickly kind of the first round of combat in the flowchart. So it's the attacker's turn. The attacker initiates a grapple. Does the attacker have improved grapple or the grab ability? Why is this important? You know, Douglas. Robert, tell me why it's important to know if they have improved grapple or grab. What does that change? It's on the flowchart.
You're asking me to interpret Pathfinder 1 rules, which is a bad idea.
No, just read the flowchart. Just read the flowchart. So they get an attack of opportunity. If you're a regular grappler, and which makes sense. If you're holding a sword or a dagger and I come lunging in at you, you're going to get a whack at me. So that's what's considered the attack of opportunity in the PF1E system. So if you don't have improved grapple, as an example, and you initiate that grappling attempt against an unarmed opponent, they're going to get a whack at you. If you have improved grapple, that is a feat, which then has assumed that you have the ability in your approach or in some other manner to evade that attack of opportunity and attempt the grapple. If you are successful in your, let's assume you do, if you're successful in your grapple as a standard action, so it takes your full round like an attack, you make a CMB check against the CMB. That's what we already talked about. So it's basically to hit against your special maneuver armor class. If you make the check, then the defender, if it's adjacent to you, let's assume it is, the attacker and the defender here both gain the grappled condition. If it's a fail and you don't pass, the grapple attempt fails, neither party is considered grappled. And you kind of go back to the beginning. That's very simple so far, right? You make the check. If you succeed or fail, was there an attack of opportunity, yes or no? That's all the flowchart starts with. Then, once you have them grappled, then now both the attacker and the defender gain this grappled condition. The attacker spends any remaining actions in his or her attack, so free actions, immediate, I think, basic stuff. They can do that. And now they have a +5 to maintain that grapple. So if the next round the defender attempts to break it, that combat maneuver bonus is now no longer the same number it was. It's now +5 because it's easier for me to keep you in a grapple than it is to get you in a grapple in the first place. So that's kind of the core initial engagement of starting the grapple. Once that's done, now there are, whoops, I'm moving the wrong thing here. Oh, that's because I'm trying to move my slob screen, not my flowchart. So now when it comes to the defender, both parties are grappled. The defender can try to become the controlling grappler, so he can try to flip it, right? You're controlling me, I'm going to try to control you. The defender will make that check, but that would be, again, with that negative. He can attempt other actions as long as they don't require two hands. So if he wants to, uncork a potion from his hip and only his right arm is grabbed, that conceivably could be done depending on the type of grapple. Or he can try to attack. The defender can try to attack, make a full attack action, one harmed, but there are attack penalties which will apply, and those are all listed here. So he can try to get away, he can take other actions, or he can try to break the grapple. And this tells you what happens if any of those things occur. Then where it gets really interesting is the next attack round. This is where it starts to get a little more complex. I've grappled you, you've tried to break, maybe we've swung at each other, we've punched each other, we've hit each other with a dagger, maybe you pulled out you pulled the bag off your hip and threw it to your friend because you didn't want me to get it, whatever it was. That's all occurred. Now we're on to the next round. In the next round, the attacker can release the grapple at any point as a free action, so they can just let go. They can maintain the grapple and do something else to the defender. They can inflict damage to the defender, or they can move the defender in tow. If they're controlling and grappling, they have the option here to pin. Controlling grappler, it may choose to perform one of the following actions: injure, move, pin, or tie up. That's right here in the middle of this yellow box. The attacker gives the defender the pin condition if successful, if they proceed, and the attacker only has the grappled condition. So the attacker doesn't take pin condition in this state, only the defender takes pin condition in this state, and they lose any dex bonus or AC bonus. Go ahead, Tim.
Can we describe what pin is? Does pin mean like put their arm behind their back? Or does that mean locking their arm out, put them in is it like a submission hold, or is it an immobilization? That's a great question, Tim. So let's look at this here. This actually describes, let's think of a pin in terms of what the mechanic is, and then we can reverse that back to what the descriptor is and what it looks like. So pinning means you're just not letting them move.
Well, yeah, we'll look at, I don't know if you can see here. So a pinning means they can't move. They don't get their dex bonus. They're considered flat-footed. They have a -4 to their armor class.
Wait, it says, but it's not considered flat-footed, which...
Oh, but it's not considered flat-footed. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Robert. I misread that. Not considered flat-footed, but they take a -4 to their armor class. They lose their dex. They can try to free, but they have to make a CMB check, or if they have escape artist as a feat. They can take verbal or mental actions, but they cannot cast spells. So that's what pin means. It's just a more severe grapple. It doesn't mean you're on the ground with your arms pinned down. That's more of a true prone state. This is something between grappled and completely controlled. So that's really the core of the grappling system. You know, there's other, you know, kind of layers that come off of this, but really it is you attempt to grapple. If you grapple successfully, both parties are grappled. Attacks can occur in that pace. When it gets to the next round, if the defender has not been able to escape the grapple, the attacker can try to escalate the level of control by pinning, or they can keep whacking away if they want to, and they have bonuses to attack as they do so. But it's important to note, even in the grappled state here, I'll show you this, the defender can't move. They take a -4 to dexterity, a penalty to attack rolls, a penalty to CMB checks, and they cannot take any actions that require 2 hands. So the attacker, also the grappled creature, the attacker cannot take, where's that at? Invisible, gains a +2 circumstance of CMB for being grappled. So that's kind of the core of the Pathfinder system, which is reflected in this, you know, flowchart, which looks really complicated, but actually is not. So as you look through that and looking at your system, Douglas, what do you like about this? What would you build on? What would you junk from this? And what would you add into it?
So I excuse me. So part of this is, I think, that so in Dungeon Grappling, a lot of the stuff that I did was using, I call it rules for making rules. And the rules for making rules, the first one is use what's there. Right? So CMB, CMD,
right.
A lot of the stuff that those were already present. And my goal was not to say Pathfinder got it wrong, or 5th edition got it wrong, or whatever. It was to say, okay, let's take the building blocks and see if we can be a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more nuanced than maybe what was there. So where I think that the Dungeon Grappling thing does is, rather than say make an attack roll and the success automatically grants you this condition, because you can always get lucky, right? D20 is notoriously swingy, right? So make an attack roll. So you do a damage, and then you roll your damage, and if you roll well, relative to the other person's strength and the other fighter's strength and size, as you get more and more control points relative to that, your armor class goes down, you can move less and less. Like, so if you grab, like I think somebody mentioned, oh, well, you grab my sleeve, right, or do the beat it, the wrist to wrist thing. Well, you got a lot of movement there, but you can still influence their actions. And so what that does is you say, okay, well, I have control points on you, and maybe you have some on me, but I have on you, so if I want to do something, I want to pull you into my attack, I would say, okay, I'm going to spend some of my control and lower your grapple DC, lower your CMD.
Okay, so let's actually pencil this out for everyone. I think a live action sequence here. So I'm a Pathfinder cleric. Let's say I'm a 3rd level fighter. As a 3rd level fighter, I have a 16 strength. So my base attack bonus is going to be 3. I've got a +3 to my strength by ability bonus, and let's say that I'm normal human size. So my CMB then is going to be 16. You know, I'm going to add 16 to whatever my roll is. Now I'm facing another 3rd.
Sorry.
Right. Sorry. 6. I'm sorry. 6. I meant 6.
Okay.
So I've got a 6.
I will admit that my Pathfinder foo is old.
No.
I just got PF 2nd edition a couple of weeks ago, but so you're going to have to help me because.
No worries. Yeah,
it's been a while there. So.
No, yeah, absolutely, and I think this is. I don't know how much they changed this into. Do you, Rob?
We have not had that come up.
It's a pretty solid. I would expect it's probably tweaked, but very similar. I would be surprised if they did a full overhaul because candidly, I think it's one of the most thorough ones out there.
So, but in any case, I think without getting into super detail, I think the difference here is that rating the effect of the grapple in control points allows a currency by which you judge how far along the armor class or movement degradation they are, and it gives you something that you can do to give a little to get a little. If I want to throw you, and I really want to throw you, I'll make an attack roll to try and make you force you prone, but I'll spend some of those points to do something. Once I spend them, they're gone. I've done a quick move or something, or tried to get in, but if you've ever done that and you screwed it up, pretty soon you're finding yourself choked out, right? Because you've given them you give them space so that you can get in, but if you don't do that right, you've given them space.
Or try to throw them and the throw.
Or try to throw them and it doesn't work or whatever, right? So again, we don't want to get too detailed, but it's one of those things where there's one of the gaming rules, no free lunch, right? So you've got the store of control. The more control, the more penalized they are. But if you want to do something cool, you're going to have to take a risk.
All right. So how do I calculate my control points?
You will probably roll your hit die. Let me see if I can find it to make sure that I think.
So
it's probably
control
hit
point
die.
rolls. Let me see here.
There we go. Control point. Blah blah blah. Yeah. Okay. Good. That's still the case. Yeah. So you'll roll in a standard control point. It would be like your hit die type plus your strength bonus.
Okay, so in this case, it's very much like a CMB. So it's going to be my hit die type. So it's going to be, in this case, if I'm a fighter, I got a D10, and my fighter had a 16 strength. So I have 13 control points, assuming I'm a creature of normal size. Is that right?
I think that's right. Yeah. Is the control maximum?
You got control. Control maximum is, and yeah, I've got that here on the screen. I was just looking at that.
Strength score. So you're 16 plus your dexterity bonus plus half of your basic attack bonus.
Okay, so that's your control points.
Yeah, that's your control maximum.
Oh, that's your control maximum. Okay.
Right, and so that's the scale by which you're climbing up, right? So if you were a giant creature with all the same stats, if you were just big, you might have 2 or 4 or 8 times as many control points required to achieve the same effect.
Gotcha.
Because big things are hard to wrestle.
Gotcha. So in this case, my control maximum.
They're heavier. They're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got it here up on the screen so people can see it at home. It's going to be my strength score. So for my example fighter, he's got a 16 strength. So it's going to be that plus his dex bonus. Let's say he had no dex bonus. So that's going to be plus 0. And then half of his base attack bonus. You're going to round up on that 3 and give him a 2 if it's a 1.5. So round up. Okay. So he's got, but it's going to, yeah. So he's got an 18. But then it's multiplied by his CM modifier, and his
which is size, basically.
Size.
So
okay.
It's going to be 1 for a normal human.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So he's going to have an 18 then in terms of his control point maximum, but at first level he's going to have 13 control points because it's just his.
That would probably mitigate to rounding down.
Okay.
So that it's just basically your strength. But don't worry about that. It's a point or 2 either way.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And so so that's kind of it's the grappling equivalent of sort of your hit point maximum.
Right.
As your hit points get down and down and down. The thing is that what D&D assumes is you're up and running until your hit points drop to 0. But the thing is with the grappling is you can ebb and flow in control points. So you have these thresholds where if you get somebody below a certain thing, they have more penalties. If they free themselves a little bit, their penalties go away, right? So that's kind of the thing. And then you've got you've got these thresholds, right? So if you're at, so 9 control, you got 16 control points. So if you do 8 or more, then you've got a
grappled condition. That's on page 16 of the book, right? We're showing that to the audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in a grappled condition, you have -2 to attacks and -2 to your armor class.
Yeah.
And a 1 to 3 miscast spell. That's on a what die?
That's a Swords and Wizardry old school thing where the more so basically the more grappled you are, the higher a chance you have of not being able to cast a spell. So rather than making it absolute, right? Because it's one of those things. If you just have my sleeve, then I might magic missile your ass. Right? Then no problem, I'm not that restrained. But I might not, right? So maybe there's a 1 in 6 chance that the spell doesn't go off because you're yanking me around. Whereas if you've got me in an arm bar and you've got me all tied up and I'm just sort of not only do you have me in arm bar, but you're leveraging it for extra pain, right? So I'm stunned. I'm just done, right? You're right at that point. So it tries to be a little bit more. And the conditions is a way of short-circuiting the penalties. Like if you can just go, Pathfinder was nice because it has the conditions built in.
Right.
5th edition was kind of the same way. So what we sort of did was map it directly to, if you have this threshold, you have this condition. But it would be a tiny step to say, okay, we're going to smooth that out and say every fraction of your control point, you're at -1 to whatever, right? And have it build up bit by bit. I find that a little too much round around fiddle. But for people who wanted nuance, you could smooth it out.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I like that you've also got here on page 17, kind of what we were talking about earlier, the sequence, of severity. So you go from clinch to hindered to pinned to helpless.
Right. And that's something where if you don't want to roll for damage, you can use the actions after grapple and stuff that's later on in the book to leverage that. I personally, obviously I have a vested interest in this, but I find that the control point mechanic really adds a lot because it starts you think, what cool thing can I do with how much reserve of control and restraint that I've got on this person? Whether it's, spending points to cause, if you apply pain, you can stun them for a round, right? So if you have someone in a joint lock, you can successfully make them not act because you're leaning on a nerve cluster or something. So there are things that you can do to leverage that tool.
It seems like it's very flexible. So, you could break their joints doing that, or throw them on the ground and do a ground and pound on them. It sounds like it's...
That's right. So
if
if you'll let me, you can attack the grapple. You can grapple more. You can strike. You can try and throw the guy off. You can attack the grapple. You can try and incapacitate someone, inflict pain.
What page are you on now?
I'm ripping through page 24.
Okay.
You can injure them by grappling. So that would be like hyperextending an arm. You can strike and then add things. You can let go. You can strangle. Strangle is always a fun one, right? Because what that lets you do is, deny air. So all of a sudden, you don't have to worry about depleting hit points. You don't have to wrestle them to the ground. You get a good chokehold on something with the neck, and they're in trouble. I even have a note. This is a common but potentially unbalancing attack. Strangling a storm giant with control maximum of 96 for a few turns in order to bypass many turns of wrestling may seem like cheating, but that's exactly what it's designed to do. It's designed to cheat. The GM may... So you could throw them down and stun them, you can just take them down, or you can disarm or wrestle for an item, right? So you can knock a weapon away. So it gives an organic way of doing a lot of this stuff. And almost all of it is make a combat maneuver roll against the grapple DC, and the more control you have, the lower the grapple DC, so the easier it gets. So there's a bit of a death spiral involved, but if you've ever been grappled by somebody good, that's exactly how it feels. Like, this is just a matter of time, unless you get lucky, and that can happen.
But usually not.
Right? My 130-pound wife was grappling like this guy who was like 6'1", 185, college athlete, and he's like, ha, I got her, and he rushes in. He stuck his head right into a guillotine, so she choked him out in the first 2 seconds of the match. You can always screw up, and that can happen too.
I've been choked with my own shoulder.
Right. So there's all kinds of stuff that can happen.
Do you have something in there that differentiates between an air choke and a blood choke?
In this one, I don't think
I don't remember reading
so.
that when I read through it. I didn't see that.
In the GURPS version of it, there is.
Because the blood choke's
because
fast.
blood choke is really fast. So so there's strangulation, which can take multiple seconds, and then there's there's denying air, which is like breath holding, and then the blood choke is roll every turn or whatever, make a health roll, or you just fall unconscious. The thing is about that is by and large, because we're all gamers here, no one's ever going to choose to do the 30-second air choke if you can do the blood choke. So the reason why you would do that, right? So the reason why you would attack the trachea is to crush it, and cause permanent injury by spending control points to damage the neck.
Cast a spell now, Madge.
Right, exactly, right? So it's the Conan method. It's very hard for a mage to cast a spell if you've ripped their throat out. But yeah, right? So there are things that you could probably do and say, okay, if I attack the trachea and do a critical hit to the trachea, okay, here's so you make an attack to grapple, and then you say, I would like to grapple the neck. Well, that's awfully specific. So you would invent a combat maneuver to grapple a particular location, just on the fly. Say, okay, make an attack, and if you can do it, then you've grappled this location, and that would set up damage to that particular location, and maybe you would say, okay, well, if you successfully attack, it does double damage, or it does a lot of damage, or it causes strangulation, or whatever, right?
Guys, I think I hear a fire alarm, so I'll be right back. Hang on. Something's going off upstairs. You guys continue the conversation.
You bet. But yeah, so some of it is allowing the game master to improvise freely with a common currency, right? What am I going to do in order to achieve a cool thing? I'm going to spend an extra round where I could be hitting somebody with a sword. I'm going to spend an extra round. I'm going to risk something by making an attack roll. And if I'm successful, I do something cool. And it's really just kind of trying to get, what does that look like in hand? And the harder thing it is, if you have something that is like, oh, I'm doing the 7-finger neck trachea extraction technique. Well, then it better be at a big penalty. Right, so that it's not just a one-hit, one-kill on some, frost giant where you can just go, oh look, I do the 5-finger Tiamat throat removal technique and pull out 5 tracheas at once, which would be awesome, by the way. But it should be hard.
Yeah. Well, it's like a good grappler. I mean, I'm told, because I am not one. When they're grappling, they'll start doing something to distract you, and then it creates openings elsewhere. So being less specific, I think, is better, I think.
I agree. And in a system that basically doesn't have hit locations, you need to be careful with getting too specific on hit locations, because you're starting to wander into places where you make a rule on the fly and go, like you always do when you're gaming, but you want to keep it as abstract as is necessary. That being said, I grab his sword arm is something that you should be able to do.
Yeah.
And you might say, okay, well, if you specifically grapple the sword arm, you could either say, okay, that sword arm is incapacitated, you can no longer attack with that sword arm, or you could double control points for that particular attack, whatever, right?
So, yeah, this is really sounding interesting too. Like, so if 4 people are grappling somebody, each one of them is getting control points.
Correct.
To control that individual.
That is correct.
Which is awesome, because I don't care how good you are. If 5 people grab you, it is not likely to be super successful.
That was what my old instructor used to say. The problem with gangs is there's never just one.
Yeah. I'm kind of amused because of all the things, despite the fact that it was like not spelled out really well at all, or in first edition, one of the things that they did do was have a table to roll on to find out what part of you had successfully grappled.
There you go.
Well, this is very interesting, because I was planning on having a grappling occur. I hope Jay's not watching. To his 13th level Cavalier, I was going to have a whole bunch of people grab her and drag her down, because she's killing everything. It's like, not if they all grab you, you're not. So that's what I have in Jay's future.
The Lilliputian strike.
Right. Right. And one of the things that that the we haven't really talked about yet is that grappling is cool for the kung fu monk and for the barbarian, but it's really cool for a big ass giant ape. Right? When you have something like an ogre or a troll, where really it's just a big bag of hit points until it grabs you.
Right.
And does control and has resistance to control outsized to its normal capabilities.
And sits on you.
Or whatever, you have to fight it differently.
Yeah, and this is actually something you delineate. I've got it up on the screen right now. So you've got it by system. So here I'm looking at the Pathfinder stat block for an ogre,
Right.
and how that gets applied to the system. I would use this exact same thing for my half giant. It's going to be a very similar sort of structure, and that was one of the things that it struck me when I read your book this morning that. Not only is grappling underused, as we said at the top of the show, but when you think about it from a creature standpoint, how often have I run combats where the creature never really took advantage of the grappling that it could have? And we think of the obvious examples like boa constrictors, but you mentioned, for example, an alligator. Yeah, it's scarier that it chomps. What's really scary is when it death rolls you.
And it drags you underwater.
They do. Yeah, I mean, what they do, what ends up happening is they describe it in very simplistic terms, like the roper. I mean, the roper is a big one. It grabs you, and if it makes a successful attack, it catches you, and it's like, all right, well, you need to make a strength check to get it, get free, or it's able to drag you X amount of feet closer.
Right. That doesn't sound terribly scary, right?
Right.
Even if you get close, you're a big bag of hit points too. So it's nomming on you, and it takes time and all that stuff. But the thing about the roper that makes it a little more interesting with control points is every tentacle is a few more control points, right? And it stacks up and stacks up and stacks up, and pretty soon you're all like, oh poop, I'm roper bait. And once you got the second one, once you got the second tentacle, you're not getting free. We had that happen to one of our Friday night game. And actually, that was probably the last time I did a grappling thing. Was a roper caught one of the players, and once that second tentacle caught hold, they were not getting free. They're just, the roll that they would need to do was just beyond what they were going to be able to do.
Yeah, and the roper stat block is up on the screen right now. This is the 5e roper stat block. He's got the Pathfinder as well in here, and yeah, it's exactly how that works. So
it's got 4 attacks.
Yeah,
it's got a lot of ropes.
Yeah, it's got a lot of ropes. It's got a high control maximum of 34. A lot of damage. Yeah, Grendelwolf, I love that quote as well. The Princess Bride, Andre the Giant. I just want you to feel like you're doing well. I hate people dying and feeling unsatisfied.
Right. I don't even exercise.
All right, and so you got some.
I'm married because of that movie, so.
Oh, okay. That sounds like a story. All right, well, I promised you guys my Scalzi story. So you brought up John Scalzi earlier, author of Old Man's War and a bunch of other really cool books. I went to high school with him. He was a senior when I was a freshman. And my one and only experience where I really had a lot of interaction with him, we were outside in a commons area, and one of the football players was out there. Now, John in high school, probably 5'8", 5'9", had a ponytail down to the middle of his back. Very much looked. He was in the theater club. Very much looked the theater type. Mark Osterberg was 6'3", pushing 300 as a senior in high school, offensive lineman for the football team, and the two of them had been in some sort of verbal spat. I didn't hear or if I heard it, I don't recall the beginning of it. But John looked at this guy. He said, "I don't feel any compunction for what I just said to you." And Mark looked at him and said, "Don't try to apologize now. It's not going to work." I was a freshman, and I was just sitting there just laughing like, dude, wow, that was awesome. So that was my Scalzi story. All right, so you've got basic rules for swords and wizardry here. You've got example combats in the system, bar fight combats. We've got Thorfir here broken through each of the different systems. Super helpful. One of the questions that came up earlier was tying up. So in the Pathfinder system, you've got a tie up, but you really have to have that full control. And depending on how far you are with it, it can be very difficult to do. How do you handle tie ups in your system?
So that was not a phrase that I was familiar with back when I wrote the rules in 2017 or 2018 or whatever. What I would do though is I would allow somebody to if you have somebody restrained, then somebody else could tie them up, and they would be rolling for control, maybe either basically a free hit, but each knot would add more control, and eventually you can let go because they're tied up enough that the rope does everything that's needed, and the person has so much rope on them and tied up that they can no longer the grapple DC is just too high, right? They've got so many penalties on them. Or sorry, let me try that again. They have so many penalties on them due to control points that either they've achieved the incapacitated condition, which means they can't roll, or they're just got so many penalties that no die roll will get them out of trouble. But I will note that one of the fun things about this is that turning certain spells into grapply things, telekinesis, nasty tentacles, makes right variable effect. Right, it you can see how you're like once you're into this effect roll, right? Attack roll, target number, effect roll, right? D&D is basically a 2-roll system. You have a success test and you have an effect test. Even spells, right? You've got a casting test and then a saving throw, or you've got a saving or just a saving throw and then an effect roll. Usually it's only 2. So once you're into that, you're like, oh well, what's if I'm tying somebody up with a spell, what's my effect roll going to be? So you save versus something, and if not, you get slapped with penalty.
Right. Right. For those who were asking, yeah, it was not a false alarm. Actually, there was something that was smoking upstairs. Someone, I'm not sure who it was, left a pot of green beans on the burner. It was smoking ferociously upstairs when I went up there, so I had to address that. Thank you for your patience. You sent us 2 books, and I got a chance to look at the other one as well. What is the fantastic dungeon grappling in terms of its variants, and where does it fit in with our conversation today around basic dungeon or dungeon grappling?
Okay, so basically, so I've written 3 books on grappling. The first was GURPS Martial Arts Technical Grappling, 52 pages long, 1 system. It had a basic anyway, it was my first book ever, so I always prelude that. But I really wanted to cover almost anything that could happen, and so there's a lot of like when we said, oh, well, what about breaking an arm? What about grappling with an axe? What about a blood choke? And so every time that came up, we said, oh, we can do that, and it just kept going and going and going and going. And so that was the sort of the GURPS version of that. But it was big, and one of the things that I realized was that in the presentation of it, I got so far in the weeds that there were some unifying principles that I left behind. And so with years of publishing and writing experience under my belt, I took a look at my thing and said, okay, having written a 1,500-word grappling condensed article for Tim Shorts' Manor number 8, which eventually grew into Dungeon Grappling, I can do better than what I did in technical grappling. And so I took the 50-page book and condensed it into about 5.5 pages and then added some spells, which were not present in the original book. And so what it is high-level principles of grappling that really boil it down to make an attack roll. In GURPS, you have a defense roll. And if those things go your way, build up control points. And I classified the type of things that you can do to kind of injury, small force movement, big force movement, so that the dragon can grab you and fly away, and disarm or something. A couple strangle, a couple classic things, but really just a couple things that really everything falls under, right? I'm either going to hurt you with grappling, I'm going to pull you onto my sword, so to speak, I'm going to throw. Oh, I'm going to change posture. That's a big one. Judo, throws and takedowns and all that stuff. That's really just a way of changing your posture.
Right.
Right. So high level. Let's not get quite so deep in the weeds. You can hurt them. You can change their posture. You can move them around. And everything else is.
Got it. And so you've got the dog pile would be the sort of process that you and Tim were discussing earlier, where you've got attackers combining control points to a single victim.
And there's nothing like dragging yourself back to the tavern after you've been dogpiled by 35 goblins. And you're like, what, 35 goblins? You should be able to mow those guys down. Yeah, man, they jumped on me. Yeah, you got your butt kicked by goblins, right? That's a very different story if you manage to extract yourself from it. Anyway, the point about that is that really, if you can go more abstract, to Tim's point before, it's better, right? Once you build up control, you can hurt somebody, whether it's striking or grappling. You can make them more vulnerable, right? You can lower their armor class by spending control points, right? I open up something and so that I can stab. I can open you up for a friend. I can spend my control point so that Bob can stab you. Sorry, Sir Bob can get his javelin in, right? I can open up your defenses for a follow-on strike. And especially with Pathfinder, because you have multiple attacks, there's no reason why you couldn't grapple, develop that into an armor class lowering attack, and then stab through it with your magic sword of obliteration. Right? So there are ways of saying things where you can sort of do some really cool stuff. Where you can build up to some of these things where maybe the armor class is too high to get in on it. Because by and large, so armor class, that's another thing. Armor class that's high because of thick skin is going to be different than armor class because you're fast.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Wearing plate armor doesn't do much against somebody grappling you. If you look at the fight books, people are throwing each other around in tin cans all the time. And then you open up the thing and stab them with the rondel dagger. But that's how you beat a guy that you can't punch through the armor class. You throw them down, and you stick them somewhere their armor class isn't any good. And that's the sort of thing that becomes an emergent behavior that you can enable through a system like this, where you look at the grapple DC for someone who's got magic plate armor. It's not necessarily any higher if I'm picking you up and throwing you down. I might not be able to punch through you with my sword or my warhammer, but I can damn well throw you to the ground. And that starts to come again?
Or throw you off the cliff.
Or throw you off the cliff, right? So there's no reason why you couldn't get up enough control points and then do in the Fantastic Dungeon Grappling terms, a frog march, which is I'm moving you 1 5-foot square at a time, and that's also a lot of right, if I'm throwing you down, that's kind of a 5-foot down, so there's a lot of, there's a basic contest there. Or I can take a penalty to try and move you up to my full move, depending on relative size or weight or whatever. Weight is not necessarily on every creature or monster, right? So how much does a red dragon weigh? I don't know, but I do know its strength and I do know its size. So you want to do everything in terms of stats, right? But if I can build up enough control, or me and my whole village can throw enough grappling hooks on you to build up enough control, maybe I can tie you up and throw you off a cliff to plummet to your death, because everyone loves falling damage.
All right, so that's a lot of fun, and I want to talk a little bit more about some of this, and I want to have Robert and Tim ask a few more questions. Let me get a couple things out of the way. First of all, we are giving away tonight a copy of this really cool book, Dungeon Grappling, authored by Douglas H. Cole. Douglas, who runs Grappling Ballistics. We posted the website a couple of times. The store is posted, is in a link now. He has over 30 published pieces that are in there across 17 Kickstarters and things that he's done separately. All kinds of great content. If you've read it, it's well organized. His thoughts are well expressed. The prose is solid. It's well written stuff. These are good books. I've looked at several of them. Would definitely recommend them. So check his stuff out. We're going to give away a copy of that tonight, and we'll do those in just a moment. Type hashtag BlueBoxRPG in the chat. to enter into your opportunity for the giveaway. And then also, we want to talk about what's happening this weekend. We have our Friday Night Crusades is going to be back on Friday night. Rob, anything special you want to share with us? We're in the Temple of Elemental Evil, right?
Yeah, we're in Temple of Elemental Evil. They're starting to get creative. The party managed to get themselves out of some hot water momentarily, but they're going back in, and they have a plan. I'm not saying it's a good one. I'm not saying it's a bad one, but they have something of a plan going.
All right, so that'll be fun. If you've not checked out Friday Night Crusades, that's in our Discord, and it's a very easy game to jump in. It's running the Castles and Crusade system. Robert is your castle keeper. It's not streamed. It's just in our Discord. It's voice-based. Robert, I think, shares his camera quite a bit, but most of the players are just on voice, and you don't have to make a weekly commitment. You can pop in any week that you want to and just roll up a character and play on the spot. If you can make it 1 week out of 5, that's fine. Robert gets you in the game, and you can have a good time. So that's a really easy way for you to jump in and play some D&D with us here at Blue Box in our Discord on Friday nights at 7 Central. Sunday,
if you show up with a character, you will go. Do not worry about how many people are in the channel. If you have a character, you will run.
Robert will never leave you at the altar. And then on Sunday, we have Tears of Aird. Tears of Aird, we were off last week. We had 2 players out. We're back this week. You can watch the Understreet Rats adults now all after their 7-year age up. And we're on Tears of Aird number 18, so we're still very, very early into that campaign. That's in the Trollord Games World of Aird. And it has been fantastically well received. The players are incredible. If you've not checked out Tears of Aird, you owe it to yourself. It's Sundays at 1 o'clock Central right here on Blue Box, and the whole crew will be back. Then the big announcements on Tuesday of next week. The Sea of Dark Sun. Dark Sun meets the Flanness. The rain of colorless fire has left the Sea of Dust devastated, but all of those Suel mages were not killed. Many of them foresaw what was coming, buried themselves deep in the earth, and became the sorcerer kings and queens of the Sea of Dark Sun. And so this will launch next Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, and it's going to be epic. We have all kinds of custom work that's been done. I think I have another slide I can show you here. I want to acknowledge some of these folks that have been engaged and involved. We have Baladrox, who has done custom terrain, Tailspire terrain in the system. This is all the TS stuff because we're shouting this out on the Bouncy Rock sites as well. Demon Gum, Simseat, Gone Splitters, Astalri, Skarnor, all of these are big names in this community that have all contributed to this. We also have 3D prints of all of these same assets being done by Patrick Fraley. He was talking about how busy he is earlier in the chat. He's bleary-eyed. He's been sending me pictures all day, making sure the paints are right. I've got multiple frontline gaming mats and terrain. It's going to be an extravaganza of both virtual and physical tabletop items. You have custom music by Dice Songs that we're going to be playing, and then the story, the characters, oh my goodness, the backstories of these characters, the work that they have put into them. It is going to be so sad when I TPK them. It is going to be
the first episode.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolute. I'll be the one crying if that happens. I literally will cry if that happens. So don't miss that. Join us at 5 o'clock on Central Tuesday night, May 2nd, and you can be part of the very first chapter of Book 3 of Greyhawk Awakening. And then another quick announcement. You might remember these gals. These were the inaugural participants in our Throw Dice Like a Girl session that we did back on March 22nd. And they're going to be regulars now on Blue Box. We have both a quarterly game that's going to be run. Ashlyn, Dollar Store DM, is going to DM it. I'll be a player in it. And Tim, I'm going to play 2 things I've never played before. I've never played a female character, and I've never played a cleric. So I'm going to be a female cleric in this game, and Ashlyn's going to DM it with these amazing ladies. But also, I believe it's May 31st, they're going to be back with us for our Romance in RPGs session. And we're going to talk about how to create meaningful, compelling, story-based romance, right ways to do it, wrong ways to do it. How do you tie the story arcs in? Because though we do like stabbing people with things in role-playing games, there are other parts of the human experience. Sorry, Tim. There are other parts of the human experience which are valid and should be told in these stories. And so all of these ladies will be back with us on that date, and we're going to have a great conversation about
I had marriage in my game I was running. You were an active participant.
Marriage. So yeah, absolutely.
Tell the underdogs.
Yes, I know, and I almost had a second wife. I was that close. All right, so hashtag BlueBoxRPG in the chat. Let's just go through a couple other points here. Rob, what are the questions or comments do you have for our amazing guest tonight? Douglas, you've been fantastic.
Ooh, I was funny. My question was originally going to be about the monster stuff, but kind of covered that.
We'll come back to you. I'll give you a second think. Tim.
Yeah.
Okay, I definitely have some. I wanted to make sure we talked about a little bit, and Douglas, see if you agree with this. If you've ever grappled without any training and had somebody who you outclass physically in every way you can imagine submit you over and over and over again, you realize that training and proficiency in it is way more important. In the original D&D, grappling was like anyone can grapple, and so you didn't need a skill. I truly believe there should be massive penalties if you're not proficient. You should have to commit to knowing how to do that. Whether it's a weapon slot or something, there should be a proficiency. Otherwise,
So in the core Pathfinder system, one of those penalties is, again, you provoke that attack of opportunity. So if you don't have any training, if you don't have that feat, they're going to get a free attack on you with their weapon. But that sounds to me like you're saying that's not enough of a penalty. It needs to be more.
No, I mean every time you come in, and if I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu and you're a guy off the street bigger than me, I am going to pwn you. You are done. I'm going to
It depends on how much bigger. If you're Tim and you weigh 200 pounds and I'm Tick and I weigh 1,400 pounds.
Really, not that much. I mean,
7x.
The trick there is
there is a point at which that. Sorry, go ahead, Douglas.
There's a point, but no, but I mean, but Tim has the thing is that one of the things that you do in training is you realize when you are getting into deep shit. Right, so person comes at you, and they're huge. Get out of the way, right? So maybe you shoot in and take the leg, or maybe you don't grapple their torso, you grapple their finger or whatever, right? So there was a circumstance where I was grappling a guy who was like 6'4", 250, just physically outclassed me in every way. But for the first match, as long as I could stay out from under him, there was nothing he could do, and I wasn't even doing joint locks. There was so much that I could have killed him already, right? Because as soon as he reaches for me and I just break his arm because he's given me the hold, that sort of thing. So you don't know what mistakes not to make. Once you learn that, then the size really
matters.
On. But you know, I'm not going to grapple a Buick, right? I mean, there's a certain point of weight and size where there's so much
I take on fully what Tim is saying. Like an expert grappler can handle somebody many more pounds.
But anybody
at the same time,
somebody with 3 good 2 or 3 or 4 hour sessions in practicing and being introduced to basics will outclass somebody who's the same weight and size.
Yes.
With no training, they will. Right, easily outclass them just from knowing the short bits they get.
So Demon Gun, you were Demon Gun, who said he always thought that grappling was kind of an everyman skill that didn't need training.
There's also another issue that comes up, and this goes back to one of the it's really one of the core issues that D&D kind of has that no one really talks about, and the fact that there is no penalty. Unless you use optional rules, there's really no penalty other than how you decide if you're gonna decide to role play it that way, for being at 5% of your hit points versus 95% of your hit points.
Right.
Functionally speaking, you are the same from a mechanic standpoint, you're the same character. Now, if I've beaten somebody to within an inch of his life, I don't care what kind of skill he has. I don't care what kind of skill he has in terms of grappling. I'm going to have an easier time wrapping him up than I did before he took that beating.
Yeah.
But there's no penalty in there, at all for any purposes, unless you add.
You could argue his adrenaline is helping.
Right. But I mean, getting back to Tim's comment, D&D does lump a lot into both proficiency and level. So, what you don't want to do is have a first level guy who's grappling like a 19th level guy, right? That goes against the tenets of the system. But adding on a couple specialization feats for a little extra damage or a little bit of whatever would be a great way to lean into that. And of course, your monk class should have access to those real fast because that's the whole point, right?
Well, yeah, I would say
They're martial artist types.
Non-proficiency penalty if you're not proficient in it, and it should take up a weapon slot or something like
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
What else? You said you had a bunch.
I want, but before he goes to the rest of his bunch, and I do want you to go rapid fire here, Tim. We got a few minutes left. We can do this.
Well, no, this was the main one I wanted to make sure
Okay.
we talked about because there should be penalties if you don't have it proficient.
So Dirty Dwarf in the chat said a few moments ago, it depends on how many rules you want to have, and completely agree. If you've watched Blue Box, you know we try to walk that line as best we can of having realistic systems and rules, things which reflect as much of an accuracy to combat as possible, but it has to still be playable at the table. It has to move quickly. You know, our combats are intended to be dynamic, to be fast moving, to be entertaining, and not to be, if I'm breaking out the flowchart frequently at the table, there's something wrong. So, I think what Douglas has designed here, whenever you break these things down, they tend to sound complex, but once you learn them and understand the system, they can actually become very playable and very fast at the table. And I'm confident that's exactly how this will materialize. So what we're going to do here at Blue Box, I'll be taking this book, the information I've gotten from this chat today, the existing rule set that I have, and we will come up with a very, very close simile of the core PF system with this dungeon grappling system. The control points make a lot of sense. I think they'll make the combat more fun. And yeah, the first time or two we play through it, it might feel a little bit awkward, but I'm very confident that this in short order will just feel like a very normal part of combat and will be very simple. We do not want to be excessive with the rules. I always say the tail should not wag the dog. The dog is having fun playing D&D. The tail are the rules and the process to get there. And so we'll want to make sure that we have a system that's well balanced, and we will. Douglas, any kind of other comment? We're going to go into your website and talk about your upcoming projects too, but I want to make sure we've covered everything on this topic that we want to cover tonight.
I first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about both my first Kickstarter, but also, I've done a lot of work in this particular arena, making nuanced combat, and it's a lot of fun to revisit. So thanks for that. Ultimately, when push comes to shove, you're rolling a 1d20 plus a bonus against a target number, and then roll damage. And then everything after that is how many layers of nuance do you want to play with?
Right.
Right. And as long as that's where we start from, then, I think that it will go smoothly.
Well said. Well said. Tim, Rob, any other questions?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. So
I like it.
yeah, I like it as well. I thought you might, Tim. Talk to us about this. What is the best supporting actors, adversaries, and allies?
So I'll call it BSA just because it's a long title. So one of the things that I did, and I'm doing for Old School Essentials, I did it for the Fantasy Trip, is I have these things called character collections. In this particular case, it's Best Supporting Actors. It's 172 pre-generated characters for Old School Essentials, from one-hit die to I think the upper end is 12 or 13, but that's a multi-class character. But pretty much level 1 to 10 or 11, with just enough background to make them not, oh, here's a person with 3 hit dice and just faceless fighter number 4. And so really it's just so that, when you walk into a tavern, you can say, oh, well, here's an interesting NPC to interact with that has enough, motivation and care abouts and whatever to be interesting. Or if someone comes up to you, or the favorite is you meet 1d6 plus 1 rival adventurers. Right? Okay. Well, you want them to be interesting, right? So pull them out of the book. So that was kind of a thing where it was kind of one of the things that I feel strongly about is, if you're going to pay for my product, it should do homework for you, so that you don't have to. And so it's got, full equipment lists and stat blocks and a bit of a history so that you know what they care about, but it's not let me tell you my 50-page backstory because no one got time for that. So that's sort of what BSA is all about, is some, quick characters that that you can throw down and populate your game world, and there's enough of them as a collection. And I think like 40% of them are outlaws in one way or another, or bandits. But there's enough of them that you'll never meet. You won't meet the same one twice, right? So you can you walk in. I mean, think about it. What's the last time you went drinking? You got all these people. Well, there's an interesting guy. Well, what's that girl doing? Well, why is that person dancing on the table, right? So you've got stuff like that. One of a friend of mine's favorite NPC is a character called Sayate, and she's a fierce bestie, right? And she's streetwise, and she knows all the places to go and knows all the places not to go, but she's also an unarmed combat expert. So like she'll be like partying and someone will mess with you, and all of a sudden the other guy's like throwing across the table, right? And she's got you out of there. So it's just stuff like that makes it a little bit interesting. Like she's a party animal, but she's also a mixed martial arts expert. Those two things don't always go together, but there's an idea. So it's really just sort of a thing. It was a reasonably successful Kickstarter. It funded it. We got the custom cover. Billy Blue, one of my favorite sort of artists, is working on that. But it's got a late pledge option. So if it's something that is of interest.
And so they can pledge if they late pledge. So I popped the link in the chat if you want to late pledge on this and get access to it. You've got different levels here. So for the $20 pledge gets you the digital book and the quick reference set, all the way up to the Go Big Advanced OSE package. Tell us what like if you go like what's in those bigger bundles? What is that?
The bigger bundles is basically, I don't have old school essentials, but in order to use this book, I want it. So Gavin lets me. I buy the hardcovers from Exalted Funeral. He lets me sell the PDFs. He gets a cut because they're his work. But what I found is that if people think, oh, well, this is interesting, and maybe I'll try some BXD&D, but I don't have the rules. So then you got to go to like 12 stores to get the stuff. So I always try and arrange it so you can go, now I can play. So that's what these advanced things are. Like, there's the classic fantasy, the advanced fantasy. You can get Dungeon Grappling at the in the Kickstarter store there. Would it be possible for me to share my screen?
Yeah. Wait, hold on. I tell you what. What's the easiest way to do this? Can you pop the link in the chat? Because if you share your screen, it's going to mess with all of our cameras here on the Zoom.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I was going to share my second screen, but I was just going to show you a two-page spread from the book.
Okay, if you change, I know because when you share screen, it messes with the Zoom. It's going to change everybody else's.
No, don't worry about it.
No. Actually, we can do this real quick. If you go to, can you go to Google Video Ninja?
Okay.
And when you go to Video Ninja, it's going to give you an option to choose a screen that you can share. You're going to get a URL. Send that to me, and I'm going to bring that up for everybody.
Okay, Video Ninja. Remote screen share?
Do remote screen share.
Okay.
We'll just do this live. Thanks for your patience, everybody. If you haven't yet, go ahead and type #BlueBoxRPG in the chat.
Where is it? Where's the thing?
Okay, so the link should be in the upper right-hand corner. You're just going to, once you've selected your screen.
There we go.
It'll automatically copy, paste it. Go ahead and pop it in the chat here.
Okay, there it is. There we go. Copy the clipboard, chat.
Got it. Okay. And let me pull that off there. All right, and copy that. Okay, and we make things happen. Properties, and Control V, and close. There we go. All right, people are seeing your screen now.
Okay, good. So you can see the two characters.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so this is Saite on the right? Everyone needs a wingman, and she's the one for you. I actually asked my female martial arts friends, like, describe me the characteristics of the person you want to go clubbing with. and this was her. Right? Someone attractive and, They had a list. I don't want to go into it because it got pretty interesting. But she can drink you under, throw you across, or dance on a table, depending on how the mood strikes her. But this is the sort of thing, right? So you've got a little bit of backstory, you got the stats, you got the equipment, class abilities, enough that you could open the book and start playing. If I scroll, will it screw things up, or you guys are watching me now?
No. We're seeing your screen. Anything you do on the screen
Okay.
is fine.
So this is great. So like we were saying earlier about half sorting in martial arts, this is for Tim. Those are spells. Where is it? It'll just pop up. Right. So I've got some new weapons for old school. You got some, entangling a little bit. Not the full control point treatment because that wasn't the point of the book. But you got pole arms and different swords. And where's the half sorting? So a character with a two-handed sword can place one hand on the blade or ricasso, the other hand remains on the grip. You can use it as a short spear, but you can also get +1 to hit and +1 to armor class. So it's a little bit like a partial shield. The +1 to hit is because you can direct the point into the joints, and maybe you need to scale this because Pathfinder shields are a little bit cooler than +1 to armor class.
Right.
Old school. But it's kind of stuff like that. Anyway, so I had fun doing it. I see something that I need to fix. But this is Best Supporting Actors. It's going to be 224 pages, 172 characters, a bunch of new spells, some optional rules for differentiation, a little bit of talking about different armor types that get...
I'll paste that link in the chat as well, again, for people that want to go check that out.
So... Oh, this is kind of a fun story. This is me on the bottom right there. I won a raffle for Dean Spencer, and I sent him a photograph of me with a pot lid and my Type 14 or Type 14 trainer that I made. And so he put me in the chainmail and stuff, and I wanted to have a ready position that most people wouldn't necessarily be familiar with. So this is kind of I think it's called position 1 or something in 1.33 sword and buckler.
I was going to ask you if you have that I-33.
Yeah. So it's this was a pot lid and a wooden sword, but it's a there's a new quick movie that shows some stuff by Fiore. So it's like, here's the real combat stuff done in an exciting cinema way. Right,
Yeah,
so you don't have the thing where people are swinging at each other's swords, and I do a thing where like anyone's like, okay, I just stab you in the face while you're doing all of this stuff. So there's some really cool movies that are starting to come out where people are dramatizing the actual medieval combat techniques, which are an awful lot of fun.
Yeah. And we're going to have you back for that. We want to do a whole other show on these combat techniques because we've done some of this, and honestly, I've not had a guest that clicked so well with Tim, which actually that could be a bit of a disparagement to your mental health, Douglas. But nonetheless, we're going to have you back on for sure. Would love to have you back on. Demon Gun John said, Dean Spencer, we use all of his art for their modules. His Patreon is awesome. So shout out there to Dean. If you have not yet, type #BlueBoxRPG in the chat, #BlueBoxRPG. The last call we'll make for that, we're going to go ahead and do the giveaway, which will be a copy of this very cool book, Dungeon Grappling. And
how many people are on or have been watching?
We've been up as high as 80-something. We're right at 70 right now, I think. Let me see.
I don't see why we wouldn't give away more copies. I can make those available.
Okay, well, I will promise to buy at least one from you because I think...
You buy one, I'll provide the rest.
Okay, how many would you like to do?
Yeah, let's do. How about 10 PDFs?
What?
It's PDF, man. Electrons are free today.
What?
Pick 10 people.
Okay, all right.
Electrons are free.
Anybody that left is going to regret it. So we're going to do 10 of these guys. This is your chance to get a copy of this super cool book. Thank you so much, Douglas. So it's going to be #BlueBoxRPG in the chat. I'm going to run this 10 times. If you win, you need to jump in the Discord and send your email address to Manda, Mystical Unicorn, and I'll get all the information from Douglas, and then we'll get all that information out to you. And Douglas, man, it has been now we're getting more people to jump in because they think they actually have a chance to win instead of just one. So, and yes, thank you, Arcanist TTPRG. I'll take you up on that. So good to see all of you in there. I'll give you another second, and we're going to start rolling these. But yeah, don't forget. Join us Friday night for Discord for Friday Night Crusades, Sunday for Tears of Aird, and then Tuesday the big launch of Greyhawk Awakening Book 3. In fact, I'll go ahead and I'll play this while we're letting people get that typed in. If you haven't seen this yet, this is our trailer. I've played this a couple of times. Hashtag BlueBoxRPG in the chat. Coming very soon, and those were the custom music stylings of Joffrey of Dice Songs. All right, let's do our first roll, and as we're doing this, I'll let you guys chat a little bit more, and I'll start rolling some giveaways here.
Poor dwarf.
All right, here we go. The first winner of the Dungeon Grappling is Jeff. Moose has been super active in the chat tonight. Congrats, Jeff. We'll make sure you get a copy of that. We got 9 more of these to go. If you have not yet, type it in the chat. Second winner tonight is Greg Justinius. You, my friend, are going to get a copy of this book. I know Demon Gun is like biting his nails right now. He wants this so bad. He's already been chopping the bit in the chat. All right. Third is, yes, I know you're here, Justin. Greg, I've seen you the whole time. All right. So next, CGG Mark. Are you still in chat? Mark, let us know if you're still here. That's the third. And now we'll go to the fourth. Yep, you're here. All right. So you've got a copy. You get a copy. You get a copy. You get a copy.
Right? It's like Oprah.
It's like Oprah. Joffrey, Storycaster of Dice Songs, one of my sponsors, actually grinding away right now on some more work that we're doing for Sea of Dark Sun. So he is the fourth. Now we're going to go to the fifth. Manda, the collector of all things. She gets all the things that we do here. So that's 5. The sixth winner tonight of this amazing book is Jason, one red. Congratulations, Jason. I know you were in the chat earlier. Yep, you're still here. And but what's that? What'd you say, Rob?
No, I was just saying.
Oh,
yeah, no.
Jason, by the way, so we had a spot clear up, and timing was perfect. My son actually won't be here for Blue Box Con. He's going to be flying out a couple of days before. Jason's going to be bringing his wife, so that's going to be super cool. Looking forward to meeting both
Excellent.
Mr. and Mrs. One Red for Blue Box Con. Man, that's just weeks away. I've been so focused on Book 3. I've not really been hyping up Blue Box Con as much, but we're stacked 50, a little over 50 people coming. Fantastic agenda. It's going to be an amazing weekend for all that are coming. All right, so that's 6. Number 7 is Rockfrog. Rockfrog, are you in the chat? You, who I'm guessing are 2 years younger than me by your Rockfrog 73. Let us know in the chat if you are still here. You must be present to win. You are. All right. All right. So all kinds of emails are going to be going to Manda, Mystical Unicorn, in my Discord. If you're not in my Discord, you have to get in the Discord and send her your information. All right. The 8th giveaway tonight is Tracy Renreb. Tracy, are you there? Tracy, one of the biggest givers we have, always providing gift subs and bits, and yes, and thank you very much, Tracy. All right, and then number 9 is Lupus Mike. Actually, is friend of Tom Vantalord, and Mike is helping us now with our Twitch extension that we're working on. He's joined the team with a couple other of our Blue Box software development folks. So we're building a custom Twitch extension, and he's helping us with that, setting up a web server right now. And congrats on that win, Mike. And then number 10 is Chris, 2000 Caesar. Congratulations to all of these guys. Great job. Congrats to the guys and gals who won that. And man, Douglas, what a pleasure to have you on tonight. Very knowledgeable, excellent communication, really enjoyed by the chat. And you had a lot of people really hanging on every word tonight. I think you've helped a lot of DMs and given ideas to a lot of players. I'm going to give you the final word as I get ready to raid our friend Lord Gazumba.
Again, thank you for having me. I always like talking about gaming and trying to find ways to bring the fun to combat without bringing the pain of too many rules and things that slow you down. It's always a fine thing, but as people get more and more into it, they'll be like, oh, well, what about this? And you're like, yes, let's do that. But it'll build. So I want to thank everyone for having me, and I hope those that enjoyed the book. I'll distribute them if I can get emails. I'll send out comp copies through DriveThruRPG so that you have them archived and there's no loss there. And other than that, I appreciate the time that you guys gave me.
Thank you very much to my ever-present co-host, Rob. Enjoyed having you on tonight. I know you had a long day. I appreciate you being on with us. Thank you to Tim, who jumped in late, actually cleared his schedule to be here tonight and proved to be a critical part of the group tonight. But most of all, thank you to our guest, Douglas H. Cole. Check him out, Grappling. I just, hold on, the website just skipped my head again. I've piped it 3 times. Grappling.
Ballistic Gaming.
Ballistic Gaming. Thank you. That's why I couldn't remember it. Ballistic Gaming. Check him out. BallisticGaming.com. And we've posted his stuff very many times. Thank you so much for being with us. And we're rating Lord Gazumba now. We'll see you Sunday on the Twitch stream for Tears of Air at 1 o'clock Central. Blue Box signing out.
I know. I already have the books in the cart.
Let's go.